I am Theophilus Kwenu, a student at the University of Education, Winneba, Department of Graphic Design, and a multimedia student. Today, I am here to share with you my experience during my industrial attachment. Before I begin, I would like to give a brief description of where I had my industrial attachment. I had my industrial attachment at Pixel Motion. Pixel Motion is located at Tema, Community 17 near Zongo Bar. Pixel Motion is a 3D animation studio. They are well versed in 3D character creation and environment creation. They are very powerful when it comes to storytelling. My stay at Pixel Motion has helped me to develop numerous skills, which I would like to begin with. The first thing I have been able to develop is how to light up a 3D scene. Before I went on the attachment, I had a way or a style of lighting up my scene. I used to position the lights anyhow I wanted, and once I get the feel and I think it's okay for me, I just do the render. But then during the attachment, my CEO enlightened me that when it comes to lighting, every light that you position in your scene, you would have to switch it on to see the effect that it is or the impact on the scene. And he taught me a lot of attributes that are related to the light that you can tweak to get a particular effect. Some of these attributes are the exposure, the intensity, the color, and even the visibility, how the light becomes visible in your scene. Another thing that I learned is that when you load a sky dome or when you place a sky dome light in your scene, you can actually connect an HDRI to the sky dome, but then you can also make the HDRI not to be visible to the camera. So you will feel the impact of the HDRI, but then you will not see it in the scene. The next thing I've been able to improve on is generating various texture maps for texturing. Texturing is basically wrapping an image around your objects in your 3D scene. So the basic thing I knew was you would just generate an image that you want to texture your object with, and then you will load it into your color channel in the 3D software. But then during internship or during the attachment, I was introduced to a standalone software known as Materialize. And this particular software enables you to generate various texture maps. So I got to know about the height map, the normal map, the diffuse map, and then other various maps that you could actually generate in the software that will enable you to simulate how the object actually looks in reality. Someone may ask, is it really necessary to upload or connect all these channels? It is very necessary because the 3D software uses all these maps to do a calculation and then give you a real feel of how the object actually looks in reality. Especially when it has to do with shadows and all that, there is a map called the ambient occlusion map. When you load that channel, the calculation is set that all the light bouncing in your scene and the reflections, you do have the feel of how it will look like in reality. Also, when it comes to texturing, my CEO taught me that it is not always that you would have to go to a website to download high quality image. Once you have your camera, you can actually scout around your environment and then look for the kind of images you want to use for your texturing. But then here is the technique, or here is the trick. You cannot just pick or take any shot and use it for texturing. There is a way you have to capture the image so that any 3D artist can even pick the image and create a material out of it and use it for texturing. This is how it is done. You have to take the image in a way that it will have no specular or highlight or shadows. The image must be flat as possible. Another thing I have improved on is human modeling. before I went on the attachment, I only knew about the box modeling, where you will use a box to create the human head. But my CEO taught me that you can actually use a sphere, or start with a sphere acting as the eyeball of the character, and then you go on to create the eye socket, and that makes it easier for you to create the human head. Whilst we were progressing, we were introduced to our main work, or our main project for our stay, and it was actually a story titled Welcome Home, where we needed to create a lot of trees and plants to populate our scene. So my CEO realized that I was generating the plants using the Maya paint effect, where you would actually pick a brush that will act as a plant, then you just paint it in your scene and then convert them to meshes and then tweak them to the desirable effect. But then he taught us that when it comes to environment creation, he has a couple of plugins that helps him to populate his scenes with plants and trees. So one of these software is the speed tree, or one of these plugins is the speed tree. It actually allows you to create numerous and diverse kinds of plants that you can actually also convert them to meshes and save them as a mesh, and then use them in any scene or whenever you need a plant in your scene. The other one, we call it the IV generator. That one is not necessarily for creating trees, but actually for creating creeping plants. I asked my boss, why does he use creeping plants in his scenes? And he said, normally when you are creating certain objects within your scenes, you will have to hide some from the camera so that it will give you that natural feel. So I realized that all the blocks we created in the scene were covered with creeping plants, and that made the scene very beautiful. And another interesting thing I was able to learn during my industrial attachment is script editing. I am not much into script writing, but then when we were introduced to our main project for our stay, the project was a 3D animation story, and then the script had already been done by a professional. But our CEO looked at the script and he said he's looking for 25 to 30 minutes, of which the script wouldn't match that length. So he gave us the script to study and then see how best we can prolong the story. So I got the script and then I looked at it and I was like, okay, I don't know anything about scripts, so let me see how best I can do it. So I decided that I'm not going to come up with different ideas. I will just look at portions of the story and then decide, okay, let's do this. So there was a particular scene where a postman or a post officer went to deliver a letter to a certain student, but then the post officer or the lady had not even been to the post office. So I told my CEO that we can actually create another scene where the girl had been visiting the post office to check if she has a letter or not. So because of her regular visit to the post office, the postman got interested and then decided to follow up to see where she stays, so that whenever she gets a letter, she would then deliver it when he is going home. And then my CEO was very interested and he said, yes, this idea is feasible. And I was very happy. The period exposed me to server renders. I had not worked with a server render before, but due to some orientation my CEO gave us, we were able to work with them. And I can boldly say I can now network server renders together. I have a fair idea about how they work, and even I know some server renders. So we have the rack servers, we have the blade servers, we have a single server and then a double server. At this point, I would like to share some few challenges and solutions. The first challenge I encountered working at Pixel Motion had to do with my machine. The project we were tasked to work on was a huge project, like I said, it was a 3D animation story. And even when we go to the studio, the least machine that we had at the studio was running on a 32GB RAM. So we worked, and it got to a point where my 16GB RAM laptop couldn't handle the file. So anytime I go home, I couldn't work on the project. So sometimes I had to stay late night at the studio so that I could work a little bit further on the project. Another challenge I faced also had to do with transportation. But at this juncture, I would like to say a very big thank you to our CEO. He decided to pick us up to the studio anytime we had to go there, when he realized we had run out of finances. And I remember, whilst working on the project, my boss gave me a scooter bike to model. But then the reference image I was to look at to create the model wasn't clear. It had some parts rusted, and you could barely see those parts. So I derived a strategy which I call additive and subtractive modeling. I don't know if there is anything like that, but then I've decided to research on it. If there is something like that, then I will learn more. But if there is nothing like that, I believe I can bring it to existence. Because I wasn't given a blueprint where you have all the other views to look at and model. I was just given an image. So I tried to get other images online, but they were not matching the one I was given. So what I did was, I would just create some portions out of imagination. But at the end of the day, my boss looked at the model and he said it was very good and it was okay for the scene. I would like to show some projects I had the opportunity to work on during my attachment. But at this point, I would like to clear it out that I am only showing aspects that I have been given permission to show by my CEO, because the story we are working on is actually intended to be commercialized at the end of the day. So certain portions of the scenes we are not allowed to bring out. Finally, I would like to show some extras. The extras has to do with myself and my colleagues working at the studio. Thank you very much.